I I am an immigrant myself. I came to the US when I was 5 years old with my family. And then when my parents naturalized, I automatically became a citizen. I think I was maybe 12 or 13 years old. And I live in Somerset County and I'm bilingual. I speak English and Gujarati. And next slide, please. So today I'm going to talk about the naturalization process. You know, what does it mean to become a citizen? What are the prerequisites to becoming a citizen? How do you apply? What does the process entail? And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. So, first of all, what does it mean to apply for naturalization or become a citizen? So, naturalization basically is a process where you make an application with the immigration agency to become a US citizen. And when you are a naturalized citizen, there's no difference between being naturalized or being born in the US. You have the same rights and responsibilities. And instead of a birth certificate to show that you are a US citizen, you receive a naturalization certificate that proves you are now a naturalized US citizen. And once you become a naturalized citizen, you're eligible to apply for a US passport. And this is the very last step in the immigration journey. Last week we talked about how the journey starts in the US. Maybe you come to the US temporarily, and then somebody sponsors you for a green card through family or employment. And then after some point, you could be eligible for naturalization. Okay. Okay, next slide, please. So, who is eligible to naturalize? Well, first you have to be a lawful permanent resident. You wouldn't believe the amount of people that call me up and say, I'd like to help my friend, or I'd like to help my employee become a citizen of the US. Well, before they can become a citizen, they need to have a green card. Okay. And it doesn't matter whether you have a green card through asylum, family, employment, but you need a green card and you need to meet the residency requirement in order to qualify for US citizenship. Okay. Some people never apply for citizenship, they just remain green card holders. Okay. But as I explained last week, that could be a problem because if you get into trouble, you have any criminal immigrant issues, or you spend a lot of time outside the U.S., okay, that could jeopardize your lawful permanent resident status or your green card status. Okay. Um, Next slide, please. So this slide here, I actually have to put on my glasses. Basically, this is information from the USCIS website, um, which says that there are over 500,000 green card holders in the US, in New Jersey right now that are eligible to naturalize. That means that these individuals can file for citizenship, naturalization, but they choose not to. Okay. And there could be a lot of reasons why people don't want to file for naturalization. Because for some people, filing for citizenship could highlight a ground for removal because maybe they have a conviction, some kind of criminal issue, okay? Or they have issues with back taxes, or they've traveled extensively as a lawful permanent resident and they're not eligible to file yet. But the bottom line is there are over 500,000 green card holders in New Jersey that can file for citizenship that have not. Next slide, please. So why should people apply for citizenship? Next slide. So there are many reasons or many, benefits to applying for citizenship. First of all, the biggest one is you get to vote in US federal, state, local elections. You get to serve on a jury. You can travel with the US passport, and that opens a lot of opportunities to travel around the world without applying for a visa. Okay. You also are eligible to sponsor additional family members. As a green card holder, you can only file for or sponsor your spouse and children under 21 or unmarried children over 21. But once you become a citizen, now you're eligible to sponsor green cards for your parents, your married children, and your siblings. So it opens up a whole other category of relatives that are eligible for sponsorship. When you apply for naturalization, you also have the ability to change your name. Okay. A lot of my clients that have two last names decide when they apply for naturalization that they're going to drop, one last name. Also, applying for naturalization or becoming a citizen allows you to apply for certain federal jobs. You can also become an elected official. You may be eligible for certain federal grants or scholarships if you are a student, other government benefits, and you also don't have to renew your green card. Okay, typically a green card is good for 10 years unless you obtained your green card through marriage to a US citizen, or even a green card holder, and the marriage is less than 2 years old when your green card is approved. In that case, you only get a conditional green card, which is good for 2 years. But most people will have a permanent green card, which is 10 years, but you have to still renew that. Okay. Next slide, please. Now, there are also liabilities of citizenship. Why people who potentially could qualify haven't filed for naturalization yet. One of the main reasons is a lot of people are not ready to give up their passport or nationality of their home country. Okay, and that's a question we get asked a lot. Do I need to give up my passport from my home country, or can I keep both passports? And that depends on whether or not your country will allow you to keep both. But when you apply for naturalization, part of the oath requirement is that you're renouncing your citizenship, of your home country. Okay. And in order to keep your passport from your home country, you need to check to see if it's recognized. I know for India, we're not able to keep our Indian passport and our US passport. We have to choose. So my parents, when they immigrated to the US, they decided that when they were eligible for naturalization, they were going to apply because their permanent home was going to be the US. And so they filed for naturalization. Um, Canada recognizes dual citizenship. I know Germany does, so you can keep your German passport and have a US passport. Um, One of the other liabilities of citizenship or the downside of filing for naturalization is that you could lose property in your home country. Um, and you also have to file your tax returns for life when you become a US citizen. And that's also another, I would say, a big reason why people don't file for naturalization. You also could be called to serve in the military. Of course, one benefit is you get to serve on a jury, but some people think it's a liability, like they don't want to serve on a jury. So that's a con, right? And then another big one is that if you apply for citizenship, this is an opportunity for the government to possibly deport you if you have something in your background that could be a deportable offense. Okay, so you really want to be careful here. Um, okay, next slide. So this is just page one of the naturalization application, and currently they are accepting the January 2025 edition of the Form N-400. Next slide, please. Um, in order to file for naturalization, of course, there's a filing fee. All immigration forms have a filing fee. And in the almost 25 years that I've been in practice, these fees have gone up significantly, probably within the last, 5 years. And but for naturalization, okay, there's a filing fee of $760. And if you qualify for a reduced fee, then that amount is 380. You can also file your application online. And if you do it online, there's a reduced fee of $710. Now, for those individuals who can demonstrate that they have a financial hardship, they potentially could also qualify for a fee waiver. Okay, but there's a separate form, which is Form I-912, and you have to file that with your application. And there is a reduced fee calculation. Okay. Basically, if you can show that your household income is less than 400% of the federal poverty guidelines, then you would qualify for the reduced fee. So the next slide, I believe, has that federal poverty guidelines for naturalization, right? So we're going to be looking at the column all the way on the right for reduced fee based on the 400% of the federal poverty guidelines. So if you have four people in your household, then and your household income is less than 128,600, then you're eligible for the reduced fee. And you would have to include your tax return to show, what your household income is at the time of filing for the naturalization application. So a lot of people aren't aware of this. So this is something that you definitely should take a look at. I imagine with LVSC and the tutors, you guys are probably um, helping the students once they've already filed for naturalization. So it may not be possible, but it is good for individuals to know that there is this reduced fee option. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. There are some very specific naturalization provisions. I'm going to talk to you about the general one, which is, you have to be a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years, but these are some of the other various programs. The first one is if you're a spouse of a US citizen and you've been married and living together for 3 years, um, then you're eligible to apply for naturalization. It's like the fast track to naturalization. Now, you don't need to get your green card through the spouse. A lot of times people are confused about that. You can actually get your green card through employment sponsorship. Okay. And if that's the case, you would typically wait 5 years before you apply for naturalization. But in the interim, if you are married to a US citizen and you're living together for 3 years, okay, married and living together for 3 years, then you're eligible to apply for naturalization before the 5 year period. And I'm not going to go through all of these things, but they have special provisions for people that obtain green cards through WAWA, the Violence Against Women's Act. Also, if you are a spouse of a U.S. citizen that's stationed abroad, then you can bypass, to some extent, the residency requirement. Members of the military, there's also special naturalization provisions for that. And then the last two I do want to talk about is the automatic acquisition of citizenship. So when you naturalize, you automatically can give citizenship to your children under 18. Okay, so that's actually what happened to me when my parents naturalized. I was 12, 13 years old, and once they became citizens, I automatically am considered a citizen. I applied for a US passport with them. I did not apply for my own naturalization certificate. I wish I would have done that. Um, because I think at the time, I actually don't even know what it was, but when I became a licensed attorney and started practicing immigration, I looked it up and it was like $310 or something to apply for my own naturalization certificate after the fact. And I think the last time I looked was sometime last year. It's like over $1,000. So it's ridiculous. But I have a US passport and that's that. Um, And there's also a provision for if you give birth, if you are a U.S. citizen and you give birth outside the U.S., your child is still considered a U.S. citizen. Okay, you would actually apply for a consular birth certificate. It's a consular birth abroad birth certificate, I think it's called, and you apply for that at the U.S. consulate or embassy outside the U.S. Okay, so these are some of the other naturalization provisions. Okay, next slide, please. But again, most people are going to be applying under the normal naturalization process. And so on this slide here, we have all of the different eligibility criteria. First one is you need to be 18 years old, okay? And you also need to be a lawful permanent resident or have your green card for at least 5 years. Um, if you're married to a US citizen, then again, you can apply after 3 years. You have to also be a continuous resident of the US for that 5 year period. Okay, and I think the next slide talks more in depth about continuous residence and physical presence. But you also need to have physical presence in the US for half that time. So you can't have a green card and then live outside the US for most of the year, because then what happens is you're not going to be eligible for naturalization until you can show that you meet this continuous and physical presence requirement. You also need to live in the state or jurisdiction that you're applying for naturalization for at least 3 months. So a lot of times I have clients who maybe are going to be relocating, and I say, look, please, if you can stay here until the naturalization is over, especially if they're moving to, states or jurisdictions where the backlog or processing time is excessive. But if you do move during the time that your naturalization is in process, they will transfer your case to that office. Okay, so we try to avoid that. You also have to be a person of good moral character. Now, there was a recent policy update on this good moral character requirement, and I'm going to talk more about what that means. Um, there is a naturalization exam, and in order to become a citizen, you have to be able to demonstrate that you can speak, read, write, and understand English. There's also a civics test, and so you have to demonstrate that you have knowledge of US government and history. That's also changed, okay, recently, or will change in about a month, and I'll talk to you more about that. When you are taking the oath of allegiance, you also have to agree to the principles of the U.S. Constitution, that you're going to defend the Constitution, you're willing to bear arms, you are willing to perform non-combatant service. So there's like a whole slew of things that you need to agree to. Um, Also, another big one is that as a male living in the US between the ages of 18 and 26, you need to have registered for selective service. Okay, and if you don't register, it could be a grounds for denying your naturalization. Okay, and then the final requirement or eligibility for naturalization is you have to take the oath of allegiance. Next slide, please. So those are that's the overview of the naturalization eligibility. And if you are eligible and you want to file for naturalization, typically what the application entails is you file the application. You have to include a copy of your green card, your passport. You also have to disclose any and all arrest, charges, citations, okay? And you have to be truthful, and even if the charges were dismissed, you have to disclose all of that because that goes towards the good moral character requirement. If you are a male applying for naturalization, you also have to provide proof of your selective service registration. And if during the course of your lawful permanent resident status, your marital status changed, you need to provide documentation of that. Okay. If at this time, maybe you're not eligible, okay, then I would probably review the eligibility requirements, identify what the problem areas are, and, determine whether or not you're able to remedy that, and it's probably best to wait until you do qualify. And, I do recommend, of course, speaking to an attorney, an immigration attorney, um, for any specific issues. Okay, next slide, please. So one eligibility requirement is that you have to maintain continuous residency and physical presence during the statutory period. So what does that mean? That means you have to be a lawful permanent resident for at least 5 years before you can apply. And during that 5-year period, you have to be living in the US. If you travel outside the US for more than 6 months on a single trip, but less than a year, that breaks this continuous residency requirement. Okay. But there is a rebuttable presumption. If you can demonstrate that you were stuck outside the US during this time, um, but you still have property here, your family is here, you file tax returns here, you should be able to overcome that. Okay. The physical presence requirement is that you have to be physically in the US for half the time during that 5-year residency requirement. So you just basically count the total number of days. Okay. So if you're filing today, um, September 25th, 2025, you go back 5 years and you count physically the number of days you were in the United States. If you are here for half the time, okay, then you meet the physical presence requirement, and that's 913 days. And if you are applying based on marriage to a US citizen, then it's 548 days. Okay. Now, believe it or not, every single day counts. So if you apply for naturalization, but you don't meet the physical presence requirement by one day, they won't be able to naturalize you. Okay. You have to actually apply all over again. So, because the eligibility for naturalization is determined the date that immigration receives the application. Okay, never mind that it's been in process for 6 months, 9 months. It's when you file for naturalization. Now, there is a reentry permit that allows green card holders to leave the US for up to 2 years without jeopardizing their green card. Okay, because when you have a green card and you travel outside the US for more than 6 months, but less than a year, again, you have to show CBP when you enter the US that you didn't intend to abandon your green card. But if you are outside the US for 1 year or more, it's automatically considered abandoned. Okay. And so there is this re-entry permit application that allows green card holders to actually remain outside for up to 2 years without having to come back to preserve their green card. But the reentry permit, it doesn't preserve your residency for naturalization. Okay, a lot of people get confused with that and say, well, I had a reentry permit, so, it's no problem. But they'll let you back in, you can keep your green card, but it won't count towards meeting the naturalization requirement. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Okay. So, um, another eligibility requirement for naturalization is that you have to be a person of good moral character. Good moral character is, not defined, but there are certain things in the regulations that will be a permanent bar to good moral character, meaning you'll never be able to meet the good moral character requirement. Okay. And some of these are obvious. We have, if somebody's been convicted of murder, they're never going to be able to show good moral character. That person is going to be deported. Also, aggravated felony convictions after November 29, 1990 in the immigration context is a permanent bar. Okay. And that's why some people, um, even though they have an aggravated felony charge prior to 1990, I mean, they have an aggravated felony charge prior to 1990, they are able to keep their green card. They won't be deported, but they'll never be able to apply for naturalization. Okay. And then we have certain activities related to persecution, genocide, torture, anything like that in your history. That's a permanent bar to good moral character. Okay. So when a client comes to my office and we go over naturalization eligibility, um, sometimes these are clients that I didn't represent in their green card process. And so over the last, I would say, 5 years, it's become really, really important for me to get a complete copy of their immigration file. And also, I need to know everything about their background because I don't want to put this client in jeopardy if there's anything in their history that potentially could lead to, deportation proceedings. So it's really, really important when applying for naturalization that you know um, we have the full history and we review how they got their green card. Because believe it or not, even though maybe somebody got a green card through marriage, more than 5 years ago, if it raises red flags about a potential fraudulent marriage, I probably wouldn't advise them to file for naturalization right now. So a lot of things, a lot of shift right now with the in the immigration world. Okay, next slide, please. All right, there are also some conditional bars to good moral character during the statutory period. And so, um, again, there's like a whole list of things, and it really depends on, what they are, how many, including there's things in here about unlawful acts. Okay. And if an individual, a green card holder, ever claimed to be a US citizen, ever voted in an election, okay, that is a conditional bar to good moral character. Um, Also, if you fail to pay your taxes, okay, that's a conditional bar, meaning the officer that is um, interviewing the naturalization applicant can deny naturalization because it's a conditional bar. Like you're not going to be able to satisfy good moral character. Another big one that I highlighted in red on the left column is two or more DUI convictions. Okay. And again, it's really important to know, what happened, when were you arrested, what happened with the charges, because we just don't want to put anybody in jeopardy right now. Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. Oh, yes. Okay. So recently, just a month ago, the Immigration Service, they updated their policy on good moral character. So previously, as long as you didn't have any type of criminal issue, excessive, maybe even like, traffic tickets, or maybe you had overdue taxes, but you were on a payment repayment plan with the IRS. Okay, those would not be considered a problem for good moral character. Okay. Now, under this new policy, they're actually expanding this good moral character requirement. Now they're looking to see whether or not you are deserving of naturalization. They want to know, are you involved in the community? Do you volunteer? Um, what is your employment history? What is your education? So, moving forward, clients, individuals are going to have to go in with documentation or evidence that shows that they are a person of good moral character, not just that they haven't done anything, they have no criminal conviction, but that they are deserving of, becoming a US citizen. So we'll see how this pans out because this is fairly new, but over the last couple of weeks, the clients that I've had apply for go in for their naturalization exam, they weren't really asked for anything because I think that the officers, the immigration officers, they really don't know what to do with this yet. I think that, I'm sure there'll be some policy or procedure that they're going to be following, but right now they're not asking for anything. But all the cases that we're filing, we're advising our clients that make sure, you have evidence. And it can't be where all of a sudden now, people start volunteering and donating, and it's got to be prior to filing. So if anybody's not eligible yet, just keep this in mind. Okay. Um, Next slide, please. So a couple things when applying for naturalization, right? You have to tell the truth about all arrest, even if the charges were dismissed. You cannot lie on the application. When you're filing, you will be scheduled for your biometrics. Your fingerprints are sent to the FBI, so they will get, all the information regarding any arrest. And this good moral character inquiry is really not just limited for this 5-year period. The officer can look back beyond the 5 years to see, well, did you just start behaving because you were going to apply for citizenship? So they're going to go beyond the 5 years. And also they want to know about, all of your convictions throughout the world, not just anything that happened in the US. Okay, so you have to disclose all of it. Now, um, a criminal conviction, however, is not considered a conviction for immigration purposes unless the juvenile was tried as an adult. Okay, so again, it's really important if your client has a, or the individual has any kind of brush with the law, with police arrest or anything, really, really important for us to get the full history, because admitting to something on the record basically is considered a conviction for immigration purposes, even though the charges may have been dropped. So that's really, really important to know. So, for example, clients maybe that, were um, arrested for domestic violence. They go to court and ultimately, excuse me, the charges are dismissed. But on the record, you know, um, the client admits to hitting their spouse. Oh, I hit my spouse, but only after she hit me or something, right? Now you've admitted to hitting your spouse. If that's, um, admitting to an element of the crime is considered a conviction, even though the charges were dismissed. So anytime we have any type of charges that are in either municipal or superior court, even if they're dismissed, depending on the crime, we always get a transcript, a court transcript to see, like, what happened. What was said on the record? Is there an admission? So that's really important. Also, an expungement is still considered a conviction. So for those people who maybe in the past they have a conviction, but they were able to get a successful expungement, you still have to disclose that um, because it doesn't disappear for immigration. That's also really, really important. Um, and if your client or if an individual has been sentenced to some kind of probation, PTI, parole, they have to complete all of that before naturalization is going to be granted. Okay. Um, okay. So now that we went through the eligibility requirement, okay, I'm going to talk to you about the naturalization exam, okay? Because in order to become a citizen, you have to demonstrate that you're able to speak, read, and write English and understand English, and you have to pass the civics exam. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of your ability to speak English, there's no separate test for that. Okay. When you are going in for your naturalization exam, the immigration officer is going to ask you questions about the application. Okay. Basically, um, they review your application, ask you, your name, where you live, where you work, how you got your green card. And if you're able to understand and respond to these questions, then pretty much you're going to be able to satisfy this ability to speak English. Okay. You don't have to speak flawless English. Basically, you have to demonstrate that you understand the questions that they're asking and that you can answer them. Okay. Next slide, please. Ability to read English. The naturalization exam says that you have to be able to read 1 out of 3 sentences correctly. Okay. And this is all done, obviously the reading part is done orally, but they're going to ask you to read a sentence. And if your client is not able to read, the first sentence, they'll ask you again. You have 3 chances and you have to read 1 sentence correctly. And all of the materials, vocabulary, that's all available on the USCIS website, um, for study materials. Okay. And they also can't fail you for pronunciation or omitting short words, okay, that don't interfere with the meaning. So sometimes, however, I've heard that when clients appear on their own for naturalization in the exam, they're given a hard time, because there's nobody there. It's just the officer and the applicant. And, I've seen that happen. But in any event, it's 1 out of 3 sentences that your client has to read correctly. Okay, next slide, please. You also have to demonstrate ability to write English. Um, again, you have to write 1 out of 3, and the officer is basically going to be um, reading a sentence out loud that your client has to write on an iPad, basically. That's another thing that I always tell my clients is practice at home on an iPad, with a stylus, because I don't want it to be the first time that you're writing, on the iPad at the naturalization exam. But you have to write 1 out of 3, and if you don't get the first one right, they'll ask you a second question, a sentence rather, and you have 3 chances again. And these are just some of the sample writing questions. And again, this is available on the USCIS website. Um, and the officer, they can't fail an applicant, for spelling or capitalization or punctuation, um, unless, they can't understand the meaning of the sentence. Okay. Um, so spelling mistakes are okay to a certain extent. All right, now we have the civics test. Okay, so the civics portion of the exam consists of used to be 100. Well, actually, it still is 100 questions, but also recently, USCIS announced that they're going to be changing the test. There is a 2025 test, and that is going to go into effect for those individuals who filed for naturalization after October 2025. Okay, so if you have a naturalization application that's already filed, that's pending, and you're scheduled after October 20, doesn't matter, you're still taking the old test. Okay, but it's only for people who file after October 20 that will be administered the new test. And the current test consists of 100 questions, and you have to answer 6 questions correctly out of 10. And this is an oral test. So if you answer the first 6 correct, that's great. But you have only 6 questions. So once they get to that 10th question, if you don't have 6 correct, that's it. You're done. Okay. Under the new test now, you have to answer 12 questions correctly out of 20 questions that they ask you. Okay. And I actually had a chance finally today to take a look at this, the 2025 version of the civics exam. And it's not just 28 new questions, okay? A lot of the questions have been modified, okay? Um, and of course, there's some new questions, and I personally think it's harder than the current test. So, hopefully anybody that is considering to apply for naturalization, they do it right away, so that they can take advantage of the existing which is the 2008 test. Some answers to these questions, there's like multiple answers that are correct. So as long as the answers, are one of the ones that are listed, you should be fine. Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay, so I just kind of went over this. The new test is 128 questions, 12 out of 20. And also for those who are 65 years and older, and a green card holder for at least 20 years, they have a new test, which is 10 questions. You have to answer 6 out of 10. That used to be 20 questions that they needed to study. Now it's only 10. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so this is just a recap again on the exam part, the English language part, the civics test. So what happens if you fail the naturalization test, right? So you do have another opportunity, and immigration will typically schedule another exam between 60 to 90 days. And your client is going to be scheduled to retake that part of the test that they didn't pass. So if they fail the civics test, they'll be given a paper that says, you failed the naturalization exam today. We're going to reschedule you in the future to retake the civics part, and so your client is given another opportunity. Again, there are a lot of study materials, and if I don't know if we actually have it on the next slide. Karen, can you just shift to the next slide? No, okay, please go back. So there's also the ability to basically request a hearing if you fail the second time, okay? And I think that's on form N648, if I'm not mistaken. No, no, sorry, it's not 648. It's N348. And what that is that's a hearing before a supervisor in the naturalization office that reviews, why did you fail? And basically it gives you, a second opportunity or a third opportunity, I should say, to retake the test. And in my experience, the naturalization supervisors, at least in the New Jersey offices, like they don't want people challenging naturalization in federal court. So they're pretty lenient and, flexible to a certain extent. Um, if your client is like on the cusp of something. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a statistic on, the pass fail rate for naturalization. So it's a pretty high number for people who apply for naturalization, um, that pass it initially, and then those that maybe don't pass the first time and then take the exam again, that's even higher. So that's good. I hope that we can just come close or, to this number in the future with the new naturalization exam, but we'll see. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to just skip this. Again, USCIS website has a lot of study materials. There's flashcards, practice tests. You can even take an online practice test. Next slide, please. Okay. There are some exceptions to the English language requirement. So if an individual, again, this is pretty straightforward. If the individual is 50 years or older, they've had a green card for at least 20 years, 55 or older in 15 years, 65 or older in 20 years, then they can actually, they're exempt from the English requirement, but they have to still take the civics test. Okay, but they can take it in the language of their choice with an interpreter. Okay, so again, a lot of times people They wait, they might have had a green card for a long time, but they may not be able to pass the English requirement. And so they wait until maybe they've had the green card for at least 20 years before they apply for naturalization. Of course, that's assuming they're 50 and older. Okay. Same thing if you're 55 and older. Sometimes I have clients that say, well, I'm just going to wait until I have that green card for 15 years. So that's another strategy. If you're not comfortable with passing the English portion of the exam. Okay, next slide, please. There's also a medical disability exception, and that's on Form N-648, which basically is signed by an authorized medical professional that explains why the applicant is unable to take the test, the English or civics test. And so they have to explain, why is this person unable to learn um, the exam in the next 1 year? And typically, these are individuals who may have some type of cognitive impairment. I have a lot of elderly clients who maybe have dementia, Alzheimer's, and if their doctor is able to sign off on this medical disability exception, then they don't have to take the exam. Okay. Now, the immigration officer can't second guess the doctor. Okay. They can't say, well, I don't believe this form. I believe that, you just don't want to take the exam. They can't second guess the doctor. Okay. However, the form and the explanation, it has to make sense. The doctor has to clearly describe, what is the diagnosis and why does that prevent the individual from learning English and civics. Okay. And you have to file this form with the naturalization application. Okay. The only exception to that is if while you are in the process of naturalizing, something happens, something unforeseen or something drastic, and now your client needs to file this medical disability exception. Okay. Change in circumstance. Okay, so just a quick recap because I think we are coming on that hour mark. So first, we determined, are you a citizen already? Because believe it or not, there are people who are citizens that don't know that they're citizens. Okay, because maybe they had a grandparent who was a citizen and maybe their parent went back to their home country at some point. In the 25 plus, almost 25 years in practice, I think I did have an individual one time who ended up that he was a citizen already. But if you're not, then we go over whether or not you're eligible for citizenship, okay? Filing the application, paying the fees with the application. Once the application is filed, the individual has to attend a biometrics appointment for fingerprints. And then you attend the naturalization interview and the exam. And if you're approved, in most cases, you'll be scheduled for the oath on the same day. Okay. Sometimes depending on like in the New York, the Federal Plaza immigration office, unfortunately have to go back to take your oath in most cases. But once you are naturalized, you take the oath and you become naturalized, you receive your certificate of naturalization. Okay, and once you have that, again, you apply for a passport. Now, as a green card holder, when you apply for naturalization, you'll get a receipt that automatically extends your green card for 24 months. Okay, because remember, the green card has an expiration date. And so if you're coming on that expiration date and you're eligible for naturalization, apply for naturalization so you don't have to renew your green card. And also, you're eligible to apply for naturalization 90 days prior to meeting that eligibility requirement. Okay. All right. But that 90-day early filing doesn't apply if you're actually applying for one of those age-related exemptions. That's really important to know. And so once you naturalize, this is what the naturalization certificate looks like. Okay, next page, next slide, please. And once you're a citizen, there's a lot of material on the USCIS website um, regarding, your rights, responsibilities. But you can apply for a passport for children under 18, register to vote. You also want to update your Social Security record. Maybe you want to apply for a certificate of citizenship for your child. And now, as a citizen, you get to, sponsor your parents from back home or your siblings. Um, Parents are immediate relatives, so it's possible that they would be able to immigrate probably within 1.5 to 2 years. Sponsoring a sibling, as we learned last week, is going to take 20, 25 years for your sibling to immigrate to the US. So it's possible, but it's going to take a really long time. Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. So just a quick, in case you guys have some of these similar questions, you don't need a lawyer to apply for citizenship. All of the study materials and questions are published online. This question is interesting. Does USCIS make frequent changes to the questions on the naturalization test? Only during the Trump administration does that happen because it happened last time and then it went back. There was litigation, and here we are. Can I live in the US and my country of birth until I'm ready to apply for citizenship? No, because then you're not going to qualify. You're not going to meet the physical and continuous presence requirement. Do I have to bring oh, sorry, can I legally change my name while my application is pending? You have the ability to change your name when you apply for naturalization. Just check your certificate when you receive it that it's the correct name. Do I have to bring original documents such as birth certificates, marriage certificates? Yes, you do need to bring original documents if there's been any kind of change in your marital status. And the N-648, as I said, has to be filed with your naturalization. What should I do if I've already applied for naturalization and my green card is expiring? Well, again, by filing for naturalization, your green card is automatically extended for 24 months. When you travel, you do need to take your expired green card and the naturalization receipt. If you fail the test, you can have another opportunity to retake the test, again, within 60 to 90 days. And how many times can I apply for naturalization? Well, as many times as you want. Okay. Again, depends on why did you fail? Okay. Did you fail because maybe there was a problem with you getting your green card in the first place? Then you may not be able to apply again. But you can apply as many times as you want to pay the fee for naturalization. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. Okay. So that's the end of Naturalization 101. I'm gonna, Karen, you can stop sharing the screen.